Hey, did you hear Blizzard finally gave in, and they gave us what we should have had this whole time: faster cloak upgrades and a corruption vendor.
Hmm, nice.
Yeah, but you can only corrupt an item that has never been corrupted and that they're working on it. That's so dumb.
Did they say when they would fix it?
They just said sometime this week. Huh, way to make us wait. Hey, the hot fixes are in now.
What about that vendor?
No, stupid Blizzard is gonna take forever. Hey, the vendor's in, but we still can't corrupt items that we've cleansed before. That's dumb. Hey, now we can corrupt items that we've cleansed already, but only if it's after Tuesday. That's real dumb. Hey, now we can corrupt items that we've cleansed anytime, and we can corrupt our crafted gear. We should have had this in the whole time. Gosh, Blizzard can't do anything right.
Hey, it's Soul and welcome back to Warcraft Weekly, the show that I finally wrested control from my hair, but it'll be back. I'm watching you. This show, like every other freaking show ever, is brought to you by our incredible and generous community. The Brutosaur Party over on Twitch, and the patrons, and of course the new patrons. Just kidding about the new patrons, but you are all awesome. Come on in and let's just get this thing going. But first we're going to start off with a flashback. Approximately 50 years ago, in January of 2020, people could go outside. They went to work at these things called on-site jobs. Toilet paper rolls lined entire store walls, and Taylor put out a documentary, and life was good. Also in January, patch 8.3, Visions of N'Zoth, fell into our laps, with its almost comical grind for maybe 2 horrific vision keys per week, infinite stars being way out of control, and echoing void making tanks rise to Dynasty Warriors levels of awesome. 8.3 was met with a response. Since then, Blizzard has been hard at work smoothing 8.3's rougher edges. For example, access to visions was buffed, and essences were basically made account-wide in March. The shifts changed the climate of the patch to a point where I declared the release of this unofficial patch 8.3.5. It revitalized players worn out from having to replicate grinds on multiple characters. We spent less time preparing them and more time playing them. Alright, now let's fast forward to today, and we're once again in a rapidly changing hellscape. For one, leveling your legendary cloak's rank now only needs, at most, a complete horrific vision per level. Easy peasy. The bigger change came to corruptions, the so-called RNG of RNG. They now have a vendor. I'm going to give you the crash course on how it works, and then help you along with why you should still be mad at Blizzard because, it's always something, right? Your mom doesn't just sell rank 3 essences anymore, but also keys to horrific visions, and a selection of corruption items that you can use to apply corruption to gear. 6 out of the 50 some odd corruptions are going to appear in her inventory, and they rotate every time the assaults change in your region. So, like in US realms, it's going to change every Friday and Tuesday. To buy them, you use Echoes of Ny'alotha. And that's basically it. Welcome to patch 8.3.5.5. So let's get a little bit more specific. Since we're working with already existing currency in Echoes of Ny'alotha, it's worth pointing out that all characters can earn echoes. You just need to complete the 8.3 starting questline to be eligible. Some of us may have inadvertently stockpiled a high number of these echoes, which normally would give a pretty unfair advantage for those characters because we didn't know that there would eventually be a corruption vendor. So, to compensate, Blizzard is also increasing the amount of echoes that you earn by a factor of 5, and has adjusted the cost of existing items, namely the essences, the same way. All to ensure that, after maybe a week or so, everyone's going to be at pretty much the same level when it comes to purchasing these corruptions from said vendor. However, there is still salt to be thrown around. Some have found this to be wildly unfair because, for example, people who obtained all of the rank 3 essences on their main character, well, they couldn't earn echoes, while their alts may have amassed a large amount. That's fair, but among these critics, some of their suggestions have included just clearing out everybody's echoes for the sake of fairness, which I think would be pretty screwed up. It would suck to be that person who logged in, a few days late because they don't stay on top of the news, and then boom, there goes the usefulness or the value of their existing echoes. Hey, it's Sol with another video, and today we're gonna buy every rank 3 essences from your mom in one go, cause mad flexin'. Oh wait, the price went up, son of a bitch. What Blizzard did isn't perfect, but it's better than some of the alternatives. And then there's what I mentioned in today's gag.
My gag.
My show.
I'm gonna pull your funding, you weasel.
Why didn't Blizzard implement something like this from the beginning? Why wait until patch 8.3.5.5? And also, why only include 6 corruptions on the vendor when that could mean weeks until we see the one that we really want? To answer this, I'm gonna put on my figurative tinfoil hat. Not a real one because that's how the hair's gonna retake control of my body and I'm on to you, alright? And here's a double warning, okay? I'm going to make baseless claims that are more than likely going to lead to a lot of, "Grr, you're such a Blizzard shill / white knight, how dare you try to understand the actions and not just be angry alongside us." So cringe away, but otherwise join me on this little thought experiment. Let's start with why all these cool things that we have now, this vendor and all that stuff, why they weren't implemented at the start of 8.3. When it comes to getting keys for visions, I think that it was mostly a really awful miscalculation. The numbers just sucked. I distinctly remember telling people to ignore doing dailies early in 8.3 because, that was some smart big brain efficiency. I thought Blizzard liked that, so in essence, they just messed up. So let's get that one out of the way. It's gotten better, it should have been more reasonable from the start, yada yada yada, done. So let's renew our focus on corruptions and the lack of a vendor at the start of 8.3. I think that there was no vendor, basically to limit the inevitable negativity that came with how imbalanced corruptions turned out to be. And clearly they were. Imagine a full-on corruption vendor where every piece is available. Imagine the behavior of players in this alternate 8.3 patch when we'd be scrambling for like an Infinite Stars, a Twilight Devastation, or Gushing Wounds, even though our our corruption resistance clearly wouldn't be able to handle it. So we would either run around with characters who were just killing themselves more often than not, or Blizzard would need to design this dynamically growing vendor who would slowly roll out stronger corruptions as time passed. But then players would just bank their echoes and they would wait for those new items and just blow it all in one shot. So maybe the corruption vendor would have requirements, not unlike Reputation, where you needed to have a certain cloak rank to even buy this certain corruption. And I think I lost you somewhere, didn't I? Right? There's a common phenomenon in project planning called scope creep, where you want to apply a change to some sort of idea, but the change turns out to be way more work than it is to just leave the idea as it is. We see this all the time. We see it in WoW as well. And did I mention corruptions being imbalanced? I sure did. Imagine spending precious echoes to buy that Echoing Void shortly before it was nerfed to the ground. So let's come back to reality for a second. I happen to have Echoing Void before that big nerf, or the double nerf. It felt bad. It felt really bad when it happened, but it's not like I worked hard to get it. I just got lucky. I just happened to have it. How many people blew millions of gold on Echoing Void pieces during the World First race? Ultimately, not many. Now, imagine if everyone's purchases with Echoes of Ny'alotha felt cheapened because of misplaced balancing. It'd be like playing the stock market. Like, boy, I'm glad that I put money into that Void ritual piece because now it's just slaying. GG. Long story short, avoiding the vendor relieved Blizzard of outcry due to this inevitable balancing. However, I think that they knew that they were going to eventually release a vendor just like they did for Legion Legendaries. It's obvious to most observers that they would, but they would never admit it early on because that would just rock the player psyche. We already know that eventually content gets outdated, content moves on, stats squish, and etc. But if Blizzard were to say early in 8.3, like if they were to say, hey guys, hope you're enjoying the content, we know you want vendors and they're going to come in a few months. Just sit tight while the content becomes less relevant for the competitive side of players. How would players react? I'm sure in all sorts of colorful ways, so I'm going to leave that to your imagination. But personally, I'm just going to speak for myself. I think that I would take that news and kindly unsub until said vendor was made available, and then return. Maybe. Okay, that's totally not true. I wouldn't quit for like pretty much any reason. Super chill, woo! Anyway, that rant is over, so let's come back to the present. We now have this vendor, and we can buy corruptions whenever we like, as long as it's on sale, because it's only there for like a couple of days, and it rotates at the same schedule as Assaults. Why? Why is Blizzard using RNG time gating? Why can't they just let us play the way that we want to play? I think if I had a bingo card, I probably would have nailed something there. So let's pretend, let's have a hypothetical, alright? That every corruption was available all the time, starting now. Boop. Some complaints would end, for sure. But when one head is cut off, two more take its place. Yeah, I was watching that just the other day. For example, characters who happen to be able to bank tons of echoes could immediately buy their favorite, while the plebs and the characters who couldn't get echoes can just, stay down there in their mediocrity. Which isn't really that huge of a deal. It puts those players like a week ahead? That's a problem that we're more or less accustomed to, but that vanishes after a week or so, once everyone's on the same page when it comes to earning echoes in this case. So actually, the more reasonable reason is pacing. Having every corruption available all at once means that many players, not all players, many players are going to have this kind of constant pressure to grind for all these echoes until they can buy all the corruptions that they need, and then their interest falls off. I don't mean to say that that's a bad thing, just that it's not the environment that Blizzard wants to make for players. So say what you want about them telling us how to play, but that's kind of their job. Anyway, take a look at this. This is the first round of corruptions available when this went live. The most expensive corruption is a max level tentacle, arguably the highest single target corruption for shorter encounters. The rest of them are still really cool, the ineffable truth among them. I'm guessing that every corruption rotation is handcrafted or otherwise designed to present a modest spread of high and low level pieces to ease the pressure on players. You might not be interested in any of these corruptions, but are looking forward to when your favorite one comes up. Whenever that is, which is, worth complaining over, but you won't be alone in waiting. Tomorrow, Twilight Devastation might pop up, so it's like, yay, I can buy one, but, only one. We're gonna have to wait and see when it comes back, but it's not like I'd be able to buy 2 or 3 in one shot. It's the pressure. Spacing out when these high-level corruptions appear means that if you're targeting a specific corruption, you can feel a little bit better knowing that you don't need to farm everything every day to get said corruption faster than the next person, unless you're trying to buy multiple of the same thing, which even then has an upper limit because of corruption resistance. But now let's predict a few weeks, maybe a few months down the line. I can see Blizzard opening up the vendor again to either increase the number of corruptions they make available per rotation, or to just let it all out, because at this point, for whatever reason, there are far too many echoes out there being earned and not enough being spent. In the meantime though, well, welcome to patch 8.3 again, which has technically been, or at least it feels like it's been, the most dynamic and agile endgame patch that Blizzard's made, which is noteworthy because they haven't really added more for us to do since January. So let's move on, finally. It's a new week with a new Shadowlands Alpha build. This one came a little bit late thanks to the upcoming Memorial Day weekend, so let's go over the highlights. We get our first look at Oribos, the isolated structure that is the nexus of the Shadowlands, only without much of, anything to demonstrate that. So, welcome to Alpha. Understandably, it's devoid of most activity and NPCs and functionality too. So it's not so different from the empty spaces that were Borealis and Dazara Lore before they turned into bustling capitals. To be fair though, we don't know how Oribos is going to look by launch. Well, I mean, it's going to look like this, but livelier, I hope. It's a shared hub, so we're going to see plenty of everybody from every faction, but we'll also be a little bit split off thanks to Covenant Sanctums. What I personally like about Oribos is probably what many don't like about it. It's simplicity. It's a cylinder with a big open space for characters to stand around and show off. It's got a single point where all players are going to look at their weekly rewards and bitch about it. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see familiar faces week after week. It's convenient, it's cozy, and it's ran by these faceless loyalists and a suspicious, supposedly all-powerful cosmic being. I'm gonna have a link below where I conducted my first visit with some fresh reactions. Paladins in Torghast are not a thing. Neither are rogues, not yet. Death Knights, though, are the recent entry into the 3-round, 18-floor, but still technically endless dungeon. I didn't get a chance to test them out very much thanks to some beloved instability, but you can basically have, well, from the feel of it, you can have basically 4 or 5 ghouls or skeletal mages active most of the time, and they explode. Good times. Along with that came some new environments, graphical touch-ups, and updates to your most least favorite word, Torments. They nerfed those ad-spawning Torments to be a little bit more reasonable, as in they're going to spawn a little bit slower, and they've also pledged that more updates to Torments will be coming soon. Many of you demonstrated that you've looked at comments from Preach and others and have asked, why reiterate on an addition that nobody likes?
Yeah, nobody but this whack job.
Right. That working on a feature that even feels microscopically like timers are a waste of time. Oh, I'm just killing it today. And here's the usual line. Stop developing something to solve an imaginary problem. Let players do what they want. Here's a brief little brain exercise though, a challenge to what is a very reasonable declaration. According to this often used slide, Torghast is going to have no timers, and there aren't. There's increasing pressure, which to many is the exact same thing. According to this far less used slide though, progress unlocks new challenges and complexity. It's going to get harder as you climb. The desire to explore is going to be challenged by increasingly hostile mobs and deadly traps and who knows what else. Torghast isn't outdoor content, which, based on many threads that I've read, people want it to treat it, or people want Blizzard to treat it with that same mindset. The problem Blizzard has is to take on the notion of timers, which in their most strict form they have, but they also want to deliver on a product that does get more difficult. To be honest, it would have been better for Blizzard if they just didn't talk about cooldowns and control the narrative. Like, if they just brushed that aside and said, hey guys, that's not the primary goal of Torments. We're just looking for added complexity because at high levels, this is what Torghast needs. So if they went and let off with that, maybe players wouldn't be that mad. Maybe they would feel not as angry, knowing that Torments weren't being directed at them. Because right now, the idea of it feels like it's being directed to everybody. No timers with increasing challenge and complexity. Somewhere in there is the answer. And we have a small bit of a clue. The ad spawning Torments were updated, cool, while the creeping debuffs appear to have not. So is it because they're not going to be reiterated anymore? Because maybe they're being scrapped? Who knows? We're just gonna have to wait for the next build. I know that's a pretty touchy subject and that can get people riled up, so let's wind down and go back to some good old visuals, shall we? A new Night Fae armor set was revealed in this build, which seems obviously more complete than the previous version. I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be the new set, and it clearly looks better. The bigger visual additions in this build are, as usual, coming from character customizations. We're circling back to Blood Elves after their last iteration with olive skin and blue eyes, which we've learned and we've been informed that they will not be coming to this race so far. But check this. Ear length. Ear length. We can adjust our ear length to look like tall, golden-eyed goblins or some length that is clearly compensating for low DPS, know what I mean? If we can adjust the ear length, Blizzard, we need to be able to adjust the equally ridiculous eyebrows. The rest I can get behind, alright? Like new hair, facial hair to finally give us that old man look, and maybe body jewelry? Not really my thing, but you know, this, if anything, this could be a shirt transmog option instead and not just a racial thing.
Those ears, they're so big and the log.
Yeah, no, don't do that. And that wraps up the news for this week. Last week I reached out for a little bit of self-esteem grabbing, and I held a sort of secret contest for those of you who keep their eyes glued to the screen during the weekly. Lil Seber pointed out that I had a hilarious intro. Thanks. Brian Gardner said, honestly, I love the intros. Sure, some are better than others, but it's a fun way to get into the news. Keep doing those, Soul. Okay, and in the meantime, you two are going to get some WoW game time, so both of you leave a comment below with either an email address that I can send this game time to, or leave your battle tag and we will get in touch. This week I began to finally put the Horrific Vision project to a rest. 5 chesting every vision with every class at a fairly low item level. Not everyone liked them, I respect that. I shared my thoughts in a big-ass retrospective that if you haven't looked at, I invite you to take a look-see. I also happened to 5 mask on my 441 rep pally, which was tough and definitely worth the flex. I'm sure that you've seen more impressive feats by people who are probably quite skilled, and I am not at that level, so it was a real mage tower sort of moment. I'm still pretty bummed that paladins are, still not in Torghast, although, some good news, there are some data mined anima powers that arrived in this recent build for paladins, which means the next build has a very, very strong chance to see them. Which also means that you're going to get much better testing from me when it comes to tuning difficulties and the slow build up to an actual guide to Torghast, the endless whatever dungeon thing. It's possible, maybe. So definitely stay tuned for the next build and the content that's going to come from that. For now, it's the end of the week. Let's try to relax and enjoy this longer holiday here in the States. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stay home? Are you going to get all dressed up, fanciful, and still stay home? Anyway, thanks a ton for coming. Please hit that like button to help out the channel. Consider becoming one of our valued patrons. Of course, don't forget to subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft, and we will see you next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.